The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Codega's Codex and Curiosities. Today, I'm going to be doing another solo episode, and this one's going to be about one of my favorite topics, which is time slips. Wow. So I'm sure you hear of time travel. Well, this is very, very similar. It pretty much is the same thing, but time slips are, moments when people have claimed to have found themselves transported briefly, but undeniably into another time. So, in essence, time travel. It can just be a slight glimpse of the past or even an overnight there. Also, it can be an unexplainable jump into the future. So, I'm going to talk about 5 fascinating cases. But before I do that, I'm going to talk to you about some of the runners up. And I'm sure you've heard of all of these as well. Well, some of them will say. So, the first one, of course, first runner-up is Chaplin's Time Traveler. Chaplain. Charlie Chaplin, that is. So in the bonus material, the Charlie Chaplin film, The Circus, on DVD, there is footage from the film's Los Angeles premiere. So not the film itself, but from the Los Angeles premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater in 1928. At one point, you're going to see there's a woman walking by, holding up an object to her ear and talking. Okay, so looking closely, it looks like a thin black device, which for many of us, it's undeniable that that's a cell phone, but in 1928, they did not have cell phones, so was this a woman time traveler caught on camera by mistake? Or was she using a device at that time for like a hearing aid of sorts? Some people say that it could be that. Personally, myself, I'm thinking it's a cell phone, and we got ourselves our first time traveler or time slip. Next one, Mike Madman Markham. Name ring a bell? Okay, so if any of you like Coast to Coast, you might know of this. In 95, a man named Mike Markham called into Coast to Coast AM. He said he had discovered a means of time travel using a Jacob's ladder. He admitted to stealing several power transformers from the local power company in King City, Missouri, to build a larger version of his machine, which in turn caused a local blackout, which got him arrested, and there are police records of this for his theft. So there's credibility to this story. He called Art Bell again in 96, stating he was building a second time machine, this time from legally acquired parts, and he said he was about 30 days from finishing. He also claimed to have sent around 200 items and small animals through this device. So it sounds like he's making headway. He has test subjects. I don't want to know too much about the small animals. Hopefully they all turned out all right. And he announced he was going to travel through it himself. Markham then disappeared in 97. Very strange. So in 2015, Art Bell interviewed him again on his own radio show called Midnight in the Desert, where Markham claimed that he had been transported 2 years into the future and 800 miles away to Fairfield, Ohio. He said he suffered amnesia, and eventually he remembered his name, his social security number, and other memories that enabled him to re-enter society. All right, so those are my runners up, and perhaps you guys have heard of them. Personally, myself, I've listened to some. I love old Art Bell Coast to Coast, so I listened to Mad Markham, and I've seen the video of the time travelers, the Charlie Chaplin's Time Traveler, and I watched that years ago, and pretty much convinced right there. So now let's get to my top 5. Well, I said top 5. It could be top 5. It just 5 that I picked. So the first one, and the most infamous of all, the Philadelphia experiment. Now, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. This is what it is. So, the Philadelphia experiment is perhaps the most notorious of all time slips. For me, it is. During World War II, the US Navy were conducting experiments trying to make their ships invisible to enemy radar. And on October 1943, that's exactly what they were doing. They're attempting to make the USS Eldridge invisible to radar, mind you, not invisible. Now, according to the story, the experiment not only achieved invisibility, but also just might have accidentally transported the ship and crew through time to the future. Now, there are some witnesses that claim the ship disappeared from the dock in Philadelphia and then reappeared minutes later in Norfolk, Virginia. That's 200 miles away within minutes. So next to impossible by, just sailing out there. So, I guess we can have some portal teleportation going on here, perhaps. Now, also, some people stated that in fact the ship was briefly visible in the future. Who are those people? Or was caught in a wormhole to the future, while some of the sailors who jumped overboard to save themselves were transported to the future. And this, of course, ties into the Montauk Project. But that's a whole other episode all to itself. We'll leave that one for another day. Okay, and then the ship magically, miraculously returned back to 1943. Okay, so the consequences of this experiment were horrific. Some sailors, allegedly, were fused into the ship's hull, sticking halfway through the deck of the ship, like the legs hanging below. And some were supposedly driven insane by the experience. And others were so disorientated that they just were unable to do or comprehend anything. Now, some of the sailors even claimed to remember things while the experiment was going on. They said there were these unnatural sensations, unexplainable changes in their surroundings. All right. So, I believe that their testimonies align with the speculation that the experiment inadvertently unlocked a portal or wormhole that the ship phased in and out of. And, because I feel it fits with some of the sailors being fused to the ship, like the phasing of the ship was like in and out of reality. And that would explain why maybe some of the sailors were like falling through the ship or like phasing through. Or perhaps it was the vice versa. Maybe that they were the sailors were phasing and the ship was solid and they were kind of going through. Was it maybe different vibrations or frequencies? And so it's something really to think about, because that really, in my opinion, lends credence to it that it was in and out of this reality, while the sailors maybe were in and out of the reality maybe at a different time, and that's why they're fusing in and out. And then when they both came back, that's why they're in the middle of it. Okay, so now for those who are interested in this, there's also a film in 1984, and of course it's called The Philadelphia Experiment. The movie might have embellished a little bit on the story, but one thing they do bring in is the government, trying to secretly control time and space, and like if you're watching the show, if you're listening to the show, that we all believe that the government is secretly trying to do things without us knowing. So why couldn't this be real? So what do you think? Did they actually perform this experiment, or did they go too far, or was it just the start of something far greater and that's been hidden from us? Something to think about. All right, let's move on to number 2. Okay, so the second story takes place in Bold Street in Liverpool, England. This place has been reported, which is crazy because I've never heard about this one. This one I have heard about this one actually, but I never knew where it was, and I didn't know that it was like a hotspot for time slips. Now, this was in 1996, and this is like probably one of the most famous ones. There was a man named Frank and shopping with his wife, and as men do, we wait outside holding the bags, or we go to different stores that we like. It's like, ugh, I don't want to go to that store. I'm going to go to this store. Well, Frank was doing that. He was going into another store, and he noticed that like the atmosphere, something around him changed. He said that the noise of the traffic just kind of seemed to fade, and then the air got heavier. So now, when he looked around, he came to the realization that he's not in Kansas anymore, that he was no longer in the 1990s. He said that all the cars were older, but new. They looked like new cars, but they were old cars, if that makes sense, from the 50s. And he also noted that streets were quieter. Not not only that, but all the shops around him had changed as well. He saw a bookstore, but it didn't look like a modern bookstore at all, and that we're all accustomed to. But this one was, and he noted the name, and it was called Crips, not the gang or anything like that, but it was called Crips, and spelled Cripps. Okay, now Frank was feeling extremely out of place. I would too. If you transport back like 70 years, yeah, you of course going to feel out of place, and or I guess better yet, out of time. So he had a brief conversation with the shopkeeper, who seemed just completely oblivious of anything out of the ordinary. Which only kind of further confirmed the authenticity of his experience. Now, just as suddenly as this happened, as he like transported, not to the future, I mean into the past, the everything just kind of started to fade, and the experience ended, and Frank found himself back in the present. You know, probably presumably waiting on his wife to finish shopping. Now, you know, I'm sure we would have all done exactly what Frank did, which was research the area after the fact, because that's what I would have done. And so he found photographs from the 50s that match almost identical to what he saw, down to the smallest detail. Not only that, but he was able to pinpoint the exact location of that bookstore called Cripps. Through pictures and documents, he could see all the cars from the time period that were similar to what he saw, and his time slip, the other storefronts, which aligned perfectly with those historical archives that he had found. Now, because of all this evidence, many believe his experience, like no matter how improbable, they believe that it was in fact a legitimate experience. Now, like, and also, like I said, it was just not an isolated incident. There have been many people who have visited Bold Street who have reported similar experiences like this as well, like time slips and whatnot. So that adds credibility to it, because, you know, like the theory, like there must be some sort of like temporal hotspot in this area. Maybe there's a rip in fabric of time at this location. I don't know. So if anybody's listening that is from that area, please reach out to me, and let's talk about doing an on-site investigation, because that would be really cool. Again, Bold Street in Liverpool. So you live there, message me, and let's see if we can get you back into the future, back into the past. All right, let's go to story number 3, the Vanishing Hotel in France. Okay, so this one took place in 1979. There was 2 British couples, and they're traveling through France when, as you do, it's at night. They just wanted to stop and get a hotel. So they came upon this old-looking, quaint hotel, but it really looked as if it just didn't belong. Like it was frozen and stuck in time, that it never evolved when everything else did. So, the hotel was charming. It was rustic, and this is one thing they noticed, is that the keys were wooden keys instead of metal ones. And the staff, they said, were all dressed in clothing that kind of was around the early 20th century. Now, the rooms lacked modern conveniences such as like phones or even electric lighting. But the British couples, they found it, like the simplicity, and I'm sure we would now too. It's like they just enjoyed it. They thought it was cute. They liked it. So They enjoyed a surprisingly cheap meal and a restful night before continuing on the journey. So nothing necessarily out of the ordinary, just this strange hotel that looks like it was stuck in the past. Now, this is where things get really weird. When they returned back, they wanted to go back to the same hotel, but they couldn't find it. So they retraced their route. It wasn't like they were going a different direction. No, they went exactly where they were before. So, but the hotel wasn't there. There was no trace of it at all. It was as if it had vanished. So, and not only that, when they talked around to like some of the locals, none of them ever heard of this hotel. And to take it one step further into the realm of the bizarre, they had taken some pictures there, with their cameras, and any pictures that were of the hotel or at the hotel when they got them developed, because back then in '79 you had to take your film to get developed, they were blank. There was nothing. It was just if the place itself never existed, and neither did they at that time. Now they completely remember all their interactions with the hotel staff, and they said the hotel staff used like a old fashioned dialect, and they said also like the food they served seemed to be from a time long ago as well, which is it's really mind boggling these days that that they remembered all this. Now, Now, do you think that like somehow they step back in time? Like maybe they drove through some sort of bridge, and I'm not talking like a physical, I'm talking like a metaphorical well, I guess it is kind of physical, I guess like a portal or something into the past. They crossed over at some point. Or, as we talked to like Vicky Joy Anderson, maybe it's a screen maybe. Maybe they were abducted by aliens who chose to implant these memories of another time in order to confuse these people of what really happened. you know and of course there's always skeptics about this story who said that they were lying, or even more ridiculous is that they said they just misremembered the event. They misremembered staying at this hotel. Actually, we're at the Sheraton, but it seemed like this out of place hotel. That's ridiculous. So, the travelers, as I think, is a good way to reference them. Travelers of time and place. They still remain adamant about their experience. Now, what do you think? Do you think they found a bridge to a hotel of the past, or do you think they just stayed at the Holiday Inn and just misremembered exactly what it was? Okay, let's go on to number 4. Now, this one takes place in the 1950s. A young soldier, he was stationed in Scotland, and he had an experience that stuck with him for the rest of his life. So, one evening, he was just out walking alone when he suddenly found himself in a battlefield. Now, everything about it was unfamiliar. He described the soldiers around him were wearing uniforms he didn't recognize. He said the sounds of, like, he could hear explosions and gunfire, and he says it was overwhelming. And before he could fully understand exactly what was going on or happening, he says it just dissolved in an instant. Everything just went back. He was just back on this quiet road that he had started on. And he actually said that it was so abrupt a change that it felt like he was just waking up from like a super intense dream. It was just like boom, but like the memory of the sounds of the battle in his mind, he was convinced it wasn't a dream, wasn't a hallucination. And so this, like, it stuck with him. And so he went and he found himself a historian. He talked to this historian about it, and he was able to meticulously describe all the uniforms, the weapons, and even the battlefield, like what it looked like. Now, historian was, of course, surprised, and was able to confirm these details that he had given him so he used like the details matching the description of the weapons of the battlefield and what the uniforms look like. So he was able to to narrow it right down to a specific battle. It was the Battle of Culloden in 1746. So yeah, so without a doubt, there was like he was able to describe the tartan patterns exactly that some of these soldiers were wearing. Now, the soldier even went further than that. He began researching the 18th century battle in depth, and he studied documents, maps, and written down firsthand accounts from that era. And he says the consistencies were unbelievable. Now, he was able to pinpoint the exact location that he was transported to. So, of course, he went there and he was able to find landmarks identical to what he saw during this time slip. Now, just to confirm, so the road that he was walking on that night before this happened on was like this major route. It was used by a lot of troops during that battle. So it kind of says that this road might have been like a possible connection between his experience and perhaps like the energy or history of the site. And like I said, I just want to clarify that when he slipped through he went to a different location. It wasn't like he transported from road to road. He transported from this road to this other location where he was able to pinpoint, he see those landmarks and stuff. So, you know, was it the road itself because of had all this energy of movement and of travel of these people of the past? What do you think about this? Was it a momentary overlap of timelines or an imprint of the past replaying itself like some people describe a residual haunting? Or did he somehow tune into or align into a moment imprinted on the land? Very interesting. Something always interesting to consider. Okay. So the last story takes place in Italy in 1911, and this is one I never heard of. I find it really interesting to me. Near Lombardy, Italy, and there was a train carrying passengers which just disappeared while traveling through a tunnel, or should we say a portal. So the train was part of the Zanetti rail line, and it entered into this tunnel, but it never came out, which is incredible. Like I've always loved caves and tunnels. Whenever you entering them when you're driving in a vehicle or a train, it always like it holds. Well, I get it still holds like the sense of I still love going through tunnels. Like the sense of excitement and fascination. You're entering it just like instantly. You change into a whole new place, maybe even a whole new time. Okay, so back to the story. So rescue teams found no trace of the train or passengers. It was reported it went into the tunnel and that was it. But now get this. Years later, some of the passengers just started reappearing and they had strange, crazy, crazy stories. They said that the train had entered the tunnel and then there was this extreme white light that just surrounded them in the train. And they said it was just the light itself, they said, just wasn't just bright. There was as if it had like life to it, that like the light was alive or like consciousness to the light. And as this train entered this void or pocket dimension, this light went there with them. Now, they reportedly blacked out or were just not able to take in what happened next. But when they regained awareness, they found themselves outside the tunnel on the other side, not on the train, and everything was just silent, eerily silent. Like there was no sign of the train or other passengers as well. It it reminds me of. And have you guys anybody seen the movie or read the book The Langoliers by Stephen King? Now, if you haven't, or if you have, I'm just going to refresh your memory. You don't know the story. There is a group of there's a group that are on this airplane, and these passengers wake up on this plane to find that most of the other passengers had vanished. As they wake up, okay. Now they discovered that they're trapped in this strange, lifeless version of the world where time doesn't exist. Time has stopped, and they just keep trying to escape. And while they're doing that, they encounter these monsters called the Langoliers, and these Langoliers eat the past. Like they eat everything. They just destroy everything. They consume it all. So they're always kind of trying to stay ahead of these Langoliers. Now, so the group actually manages to escape back to the proper time by flying through the airplane through this rift that they originally came through. Now this rift acts as like a portal between two different points in time, and then also to make it work, they had one passenger. His name was I should know this, Brian, and he pilots the plane. And while the others all take sleeping pills, because that was the thing, because they were all asleep when this initially happened. That the only ones sleeping were the ones that transported through this portal of sorts. Now, so they did this to possibly avoid like any dangerous effects from passing through the rift awake. And then once they return, they awake, it's kind of like they awaken to a normal, bustling world, safe from the Langoliers. There's kind of like everything kind of catches up to them. So, the difference was that in the Langoliers, they still had a plane, whereas in this story, they were without the train, supposedly. Now, so even though these people's memories were shattered, they only remembering bits and pieces. Maybe this is because they were awake when the train passed through like this rift. There sounds like there is a lot of truth behind that Langoliers, Stephen King, and this. So, and then to even add more mystery to this, there's reports of this train that has been sighted in various locations across Europe, and even as far away as, guess where? Here in Mexico. It's consistently described as an old-fashioned locomotive with silent, motionless passengers staring blankly out the windows. It just appears without warning and vanishes just as suddenly. So, what do you think what do you think about this train? Is it trapped somewhere outside of time and then just occasionally bleeding through into our reality? In my opinion, it's definitely tied to the Langoliers, just being out of sync. Like they could just be a couple of seconds for the passengers. Maybe this has only been like a couple of seconds for the passengers, and they're trapped forever in this loop, while life just outside this loop continues on, and they're just, a second, they're just there and they're just blankly staring forward, and as they continue on their path, on their voyage, they're traveling their destination. Yeah, that always super, super fascinating. Okay. So that's wrapping it up for today. And, like, I definitely think that time change, like time slips, they challenge our reality. They have to. And, they challenge time itself as well. So what do you think? Like, do you think these accounts, like the ones that I've read to you, they're like a natural phenomena? And I mean, or is it thinning of the veil between realities? Perhaps like there's these portals that are opening all around us, and if we're not careful, we could just like step through or drive through, or perhaps, yeah, or is it like this like I was saying before earlier, like this natural phenomena? Is it just like this area where there's like an overlap, and sometimes we'll just find ourselves in these overlaps, and for a brief moment, or maybe someone's making up stories. So, whatever the truth is, it serves as a powerful reminder that so much of our world, so much of our universe remains undiscovered. We are our explorers. We are constantly searching. Don't think that everything is solved. Don't think that everything is finished. We are searching for the truth forever and always. So with that, like, do you believe that time slips are real? Have you have you ever had a time slip? Who knows? Like, and like, what do you think they hold? Like, what kind of potential do they hold for us? If this is just a natural phenomena to be able to traverse time and space, are these like pitfalls? Are they traps? Or are they possibly something set up from previous civilizations, that maybe there are certain locations that once we pass through it, we can, get a glimpse of the past or the future. Now, with all that being said, if you ever have anything strange happen to you and you want to share that experience, make sure you reach out to me, Codex of Curiosities at gmail.com. Again, that's codexofcuriosities@gmail.com. And until next time, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always, always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that come